Hey there, today I'm going to be showing you guys how I have made my replica Werewolf the Apocalypse tribe necklaces. As you probably know, these tribe necklaces used to be pretty widely available in the 90s from White Wolf, but they've since gone out of production. So our only option is to just make them ourselves. And it's relatively easy to do. Typically I use sculpting and other modeling tools, but I know that most of you probably won't have these. So I'm going to show you how you can achieve the same thing with tools that you most likely have already in your home. First off, you're going to need some kind of surface to work on. Now, this is a normal hobby cutting board. Um, Anything like this will work for you, even just a piece of paper. The putty does end up being really sticky, and so you're going to have to cut it off that surface. So you don't want it on anything that you might have to damage slightly. You might find some success using butcher's paper. I never liked using it because the putty doesn't stick very well to it, and during the process of actually shaping your putty, you do want it to hold still. So the tools I'm going to be using that you probably have at home are a small screwdriver with a good sharp point, not too sharp, but just something with a good point on it, preferably made of metal that stays pretty hard. I also have some toothpicks. You can use this for more detailed work, and there's some other details I'll show you how to use the toothpick for. And then you just need a razor blade, any kind would do. We're going to use it for cutting the putty off of its spool, and then doing a little bit of shaping. Some specialty items you may actually have to get would be these craft rings. They're typically used for jewelry making. And you'll need some kind of needle nose pliers that shape these into the correct positions for us. Additionally, you need just a little bit of water. This is my Erlenmeyer flask I typically use for washing my brushes while I'm painting, but today we just need some clean water in it to soften up the putty a bit. So the first thing let's do, let's clear off this old work, and we'll get on to the new work. So first thing I'm going to do is grab some putty. I got this big old thing of it here. This whole thing cost me about 10 bucks and will last me for a while. You can get smaller amounts of it for probably less at any kind of hobby store or Amazon. So far, when I've been making these necklaces, I found about an inch length of the putty works pretty well. If that ends up being too much for you, you can just get rid of what you don't need. And if it turns out you want to make them a little bit bigger, just grab some more, just knead it in. We just peel the plastic off of this. Now this putty is typically called green stuff, and it's a two-part putty, the yellow side and a blue side, and when we mix yellow and blue, we get green. So we want to just knead this together until we have a good even green coloring to it. If you have any blue or yellow swirls in it still, you want to keep kneading it until it's completely green. As you knead it, it's going to get stickier and stickier. If you think it is too sticky for you and sticking to your hands too much and you're having trouble kneading, just grab a little bit of water on your fingertips and knead it in there, and that'll help keeping it off of your fingers. Okay, so just once you got it all nice and green, slap it down on your surface, and we're going to start shaping it into vaguely what we want. So I'm going to do the Wendigo symbol because I don't have one of those yet. And so we just got to keep in mind the vague shape of our Wendigo symbol. It's kind of short and long, so we're going to do something like this. Get some water there. Smooth this out. We want it to be as even in its overall topography, so we don't want any large hills or valleys. And then typically, the way these were originally produced, they had a few edges on them, and the sides are pretty flat. This is to emulate a type of bone look. So we're gonna keep doing that here. So I kind of let the putty decide my first initial shapes, just flatten it out there, and then I'll find some of my edges. And I just use my fingers to shape it all up like this. And the one thing we do got to keep in mind as we make this, we want to make sure that we have some extra room on top to where our ring will go through for the actual necklace part. So as we shape it, we want to make sure we have space for our actual tribe symbol as well as that hole. The other thing we want to make sure of is we don't end up with fingerprints in there. So that's why I'm going to be constantly smoothing it over as I'm touching it. So the fingerprints will kind of show up a lot in the final product, and we don't want that. It kind of ruins the whole bone illusion. So as you go, just be patient. This stuff takes quite a while to dry, so you don't have to worry about it getting too hard while you're working on it. Just be patient, go slow. If you mess it up too bad, start over, it's no big deal. Mistakes are totally okay. It's how we learn. I'm relatively happy with that particular shape, so I'm going to start with actually doing the symbol itself. So the Wendigo symbol is basically just the Luna symbol with a little check mark in it. So I'm going to start by kind of doing a little dotted line of the general shape that I'm going for, and then I'll fill it in. So let's start by now what we're doing is we're poking it with a bunch of little tiny dots. You don't want to drag on this because it'll just pull the whole putty, and you'll create shapes you're not really intending. And all we're doing is just poking at it, pushing down a little bit as we go. So there's my general little Luna shape. I kind of got carried away starting with the inside of it. So let's do my little check mark. And where does that start? Around here. And we certainly want this to look as much like the symbol as we can, but don't be too worried about getting it exactly right. I mean, the intention of these is that they are drawn with a Geru's claws, so no two could possibly be the same. But shoot for perfection, and we'll usually end up happy with the result. So now I'm just filling in the lines that I had made, pushing in a little bit deeper and all in the shape. And if you get through this and are just not satisfied, just mash it all up, start over. If the putty's gotten a little too hard, just add a little bit of water. It'll soften back up for you, no problem. No one's watching you. Just have fun with it. Okay, just about there. I'm going to switch to the toothpick now to get some of the very fine detail on these little tail ends. Okay, that looks pretty good. Come out here a little bit more. Now, get my edges to be a little sharper, a little deeper, a little bit more definition. Okay, so I think looks pretty good. We're going to work with that. So now we're going to add the hole for our ring there. It's going to go right there at that top. We're going to ease it in. You don't want to jam it too much. And you're going to just gently swirl it a bit, kind of push the edges out. You may have to get just a tiny bit of water. Just get a little moist so you're not sticking too much. And we're just going to keep making that hole a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. You want to go nice and slow, really easy with it. There we go. Typically in the process of actually making our symbol in there, it's going to push the edges out just a bit. So we're going to try and bring those in. Make sure we still got our flat sides. Okay. All right. Now, we'll take our razor blade and we're going to create those little side notches. Give it more of that bone texture. So just take that. We're going to go into the side, bring it down, wiggle it side to side a little bit, and come back out. There you go. And if you want it to be a little deeper, just do it again. You want to go nice and slow, be easy. We don't want to overdo it. We want it to just be a bit of an effect. Now we're going to take our toothpick here and we're going to put some more details in. So we're going to put a little bit of texture, do a couple dots around. Maybe don't overdo it too much. We're going to put some extra, just a little bit of texture around there. Okay. Real light. It's just got to be a real subtle effect. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create more of a texture on the side. So see here when I had done, get this to focus. All right, we'll do it down here. And it's got more of that bone texture around the edge. And the way you can achieve that, take your toothpick, snap it right in half. Now we've got nice multi-level little bunch of little stabby bits. So I'm just going to go around the edge, and we're going to texturize the sides. Go real light. It's going to be sticky. You don't want to push too much. Maybe take that, go on the top a little bit. And there we go. So we've got our start there. Now this putty takes a few hours to a full day to dry, depending on the humidity level of your environment. So we're going to leave it right there, and when it's dry, I'm going to take it up and we're going to paint it. Okay, it's been 24 hours and my necklace piece has dried, and so now I'm just going to cut it away from my workspace here. I'm going to take this razor blade, get up underneath there, and work on it a bit here. And this is no doubt the most annoying part of this whole procedure, but one that I deal with because it makes other parts easier. I just go in from a little bit on each side rather than trying to go through the whole thing at one time. There we go, popped it right off. Okay, so now it's free. Backside's gonna be real flat. We're gonna have some edges around it, so I'm gonna take the razor blade and I'm gonna clean up some of this stuff. Now, it's flexible. It's this putty always dries as a little rubbery. That's fine. It still looks the way we want it to look. Give it just a little bit of an angled, rounded edge. Just going to trim off just a bit. All right. And there we are. We're all set for painting. So for painting, you're going to need a few things. Number one would be paint. I use the Citadel line of paints because they're readily available in most gaming stores that do other tabletop hobby stuff. So these are the three basic colors I'm going to be using: Rhino Hide, Screaming Skull, and a Pallid Witch Flesh. And I'm going to use a little bit of this earth shade for some shading. This may be one of the more expensive investments you're going to do for this, but you don't have to use these paints. If you happen to have any other acrylic paints for any other stuff you may be doing, those will work just fine. These are just the ones I happen to have. And so basically we're gonna base it with a brown, a dark brown. We're going to do a heavy dry brushing with this lighter bone color, and then I'm going to do some highlight detailing with this this off-white. Now the brushes I'm using, normally I use my Citadel brushes. I'm just going to show you guys that you can just use any brushes you can get from any kind of craft store. This was a set of brushes I got at Walmart for like $5. And then, of course, we're going to need our brush water. And you want a little paper towel on hand to wipe the excess paint out of your brushes after you wash them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to base it, mix up our paint real good. Grab one of our brushes, and we're just going to go to town on this guy. Now, if you've never painted anything like this before, one of the things you've got to pay attention to is not using too much paint. You'll see me just grabbing paint and dropping it on here. What I'm doing is I'm making sure that I spread it out as thinly as possible, because you don't want to fill in the details that you've just made. You're trying to highlight those details. And if you put it on thinly enough, it should dry almost immediately, and you can start touching it. That helps with working with your piece. So you don't have to wait for a side to dry before you can do the other side. Now, even though the back part should never be seen, it's good to go ahead and just paint it anyway. And we want to use the brown, even though it's going to get covered, because this is our base. This is going to help the other paint actually stick to the piece. Additionally, your base color will affect your higher level colors, your layer colors, in subtle ways. Some people like to base light first and then go over with their layer colors. I like to base dark first. Typically, I'll spray paint this with the black before I do any kind of basing colors. But I want to show you guys it's not super necessary, and the spray paint can sometimes be an unnecessary expense if you don't want to go full out. Now, if you do want to do a base spray paint, be careful in the spray paints that you choose. The regular spray paints you'll get from Home Depot or Lowe's, those are typically used to actually cover in details on certain things. So those can be real bad for these. I just go with the Citadel spray paints because I know it works well for me in the stuff that I'm doing, and it is a lot more expensive though. All right, so my base brown is done. Wash off my brush here in my water and wipe off the excess. Now the other thing you'll need, a little piece of paper for the dry brushing. Mix up my paint here. I'm going to take some paint. Just going to grab a bunch of it. Put it on this paper. I'm going to get a lot of it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly go across this. And you're going to be patient. You don't want to fill in underneath. You're just trying to get it to go across the top of it and just highlight those top details. typically I would use what's called a dry brush to do this dry brushing technique, but that kind of brush is not available in this little kit. So we just make do with what we got. And you can usually get by if you're slow and careful. And don't be too concerned if you filled in a little bit. That's what the extra shade is for. We're going to go back in and we're going to pop out some of those more details, and maybe we painted over a little bit too much. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty good. So now I'm just gonna cover the rest of it. My back's still a little wet. It's gonna blend a bit. Don't worry about too many mistakes. As long as you go light enough with your painting, you can typically just paint over it again. But the number one thing is just go slow. Be really thin with your paints. Brush them out as thinly and evenly as possible. Okay, all done with that. Okay, now I'm going to do my shade. Mix it up. And I'm just going to grab a bunch of this and you just slather it everywhere. Just really cover the thing with it. Get down in those cracks with it. And then yeah, you don't want to have like pools of it sitting somewhere. So make sure you even it out. Maybe take some of the excess off of the top. That's going to look a little extra brown right now, and that's fine. That's why we do it in layers. Now this part does have to dry because we have to use so much of it to get it down in there. So we just wait for this to dry, and that should just take a minute or two. Okay, now that the shade has dried, I'm going to go back over with the Screaming Skull, the more bone color, um, to cover up maybe what we made a little too brown with our shade. We go real thin, dry brush lightly. This may take a while. Just go slow. Starting to shape up. Try and even this out a bit. Now you really want to avoid brush strokes in your paint if you can, because that definitely ruins the illusion. Makes it actually look painted, which is not what we're trying to go for. All right. That's good. Rinse out my brush. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of highlighting with my off-white color. Shake it up. And this, I just need a little bit of it. I'm just going to go around the edges. This is just a bit of a highlight. It's really barely even noticeable, but it's those subtle effects that really make something like this come alive. Now, I'm just going to go through the edges. That's all. real light. Don't get carried away. Okay. And we're done with the painting. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to put the ring on there, and then we'll be done. So this is a mixed bag of sizes, so I just grab one of the big ones here, and all you do, grab it, bend it to the side, bend it a little more to the side, jam it through, and bend it back, and we're set. And that's how I make Werewolf the Apocalypse necklaces.